Hello again, everybody. We are going to get started with our technical upholstery fabrics talk now. Just one little first thing to say is if you're on a computer or a laptop, you might find it helpful to click gallery view in the top right-hand corner of the screen. That will give you a video of us and a video of the presentation side by side.
Absolutely. So just quickly go through our schedule today. So for those of you that have stuck with us over the last 2 days, you would have had brief little snippets of what we're going to talk about here in more detail. And we are going to introduce our upholstery to you. We're going to look at the story behind our upholstery. Why did we get into upholstery in the first place? Look at the products themselves, understand those products in terms of our Enduracare and our Enduracare Plus branding. We understand what Crib 5 is. How is it tested? How is that different from drapery? Look at durability tests around abrasion tests, Martindale, Wise and Beak. We'll go a little bit deeper into waterproof hydrostatic head tests, stain resistant tests. We'll touch on antimicrobial. And then at the end, we'll probably have a brief chat about product development and what we're doing over the coming 12 months. And then look at our Printlab offering in terms of upholstery. And we're done.
So I think what we want to try and achieve with all of this today is obviously outline to you who do seem to be interested in some of the technical aspects, of the many technical aspects that we take care of for you on upholstery, to help you understand all of the processes that go on behind and to help you sell to your customer, I guess. But the message we really want to get across is, in fact, we are looking after all of these things. We're ticking these key practical boxes for you by the time you come to the product.
Absolutely. So let's start, I suppose, with regards to our upholstery story. So it's all well and good us telling you that we have upholstery fabrics, and why do we have upholstery fabrics? And I guess it all started for us in our woven collections. So when we started to bring our Sanctuary and our Soho Club ranges into our woven collections, we believe that, and this came from feedback from our customers, from guys like you, letting us know that we could do with some coordinated planes or coordinated upholsteries. And I think that was fed back to our design team and to our production team, and we introduced the first of our Crib 5 upholstery fabrics for the UK contract market.
I mean, as you can probably tell, especially if you've spent some time listening to other sessions today, Edmund Bell has been widening its range from what it's been traditionally known for, especially in the UK, things like the linings, in export, the blackouts, for example. These are still a real core to our range, but we've been attempting to broaden this range so that all the key selling points you enjoy from us, like stocking certification and hygiene considerations, housekeeping considerations, are boxed off and available to you in a broader and broader range of different usages. So another really important thing about the development of our upholstery range, I guess, is like common to many things in our range, is our UK manufacturing.
Yeah, and obviously we've discussed this in previous sessions that you may or may not have been on around PWGF, which is our finishing plant. Hopefully you've got to see that and how that works. But this gave us some options around our upholstery, because within that business, not only do they finish our black decorative blackouts and commodity blackouts, but they also had an upholstery arm where they provide the cigarette match and the Crib 5 back coatings for upholstery fabrics.
In fact, I think if you didn't get a chance to tune into that particular session, which I think was that yesterday?
It was.
Oh my gosh, we've done so many talks by now, I can't even remember what we've done today. But we did a session there talking all about our UK manufacturing arm and yeah, all the different processes that go into finishing lining, they go into finishing blackout and also upholstery. I suggest you check it out. All of these sessions will be recorded and made available on our multimedia platform, fabric-hub.com, at a later date.
Yeah, and we will delve a little bit deeper into why that's important in terms of our upholstery as we go through this presentation today. And what else has allowed us to do as well is to do the abundance of international FR standards in terms of the testing. And this is, it's literally a prerequisite, so there's no point in us bringing out a fabric to you until we've tested all of these FR standards that needs to be.
We kind of touched on this, I think, in my talk with Ashley, our fabric technologist, earlier. There are certain aspects of contract fabrics that are optional, right? So it's optional to have stain resist. It's a useful thing to have. Flame retardancy, not optional, really, it's normally a state requirement. You have a British standard here in the UK. In the States, you might have an NFPA or something similar. So it's absolutely obligatory that you have these standards, and we make sure that we box those off for you before you even see the fabrics.
Yeah, so going back to our kind of story here and what Fiona's telling you about the FR standards, how we tick those boxes, the same thing applies to things like durability. Do these fabrics need to be waterproof? Is an advantage if it is? What if it isn't? And we've had the EnduraCare and EnduraCare Plus branding actually for quite some time. So even though these woven upholstery fabrics in the range we have now was born within our weave collections, we've always had a base cloth or two within our print range that we could print on that had this EnduraCare Plus branding.
But like the rest of our ranges, we almost we then branched out and increased that and gave thought to different versions and which versions of those articles would be most useful to you in terms of tech spec, FR, and all the rest of it.
So we've reinvented those, and we'll talk about those in more detail as we go through the presentation.
So upholstery is kind of the fifth part, if you like, of a broad range that we have nowadays. You can see on screen the 5 binders that make up our collection. Now, naturally, the binder is a very good way of getting an overview of the range. Stephen has it right here to hand.
As if by magic.
As if by magic, Stephen has the binder.
So, again, we've pointed this out in terms of the point we've wanted to get across over the last 2 days is why Edmund Bell exists for you. And what we've done in terms of our collateral, our marketing, our product development, what's the whole point of doing it? And I think the point of doing it is to give you very different options and products for various different settings and market sectors that you may work in, with varying different fabric, performance, technical performance. And our upholstery binder is just as useful to you as the light control binder, the print binder, the weave binder, the workroom
possibly binder. Even more universal. One of the key reasons we wanted to get upholstery really sorted in our collection is, a blackout is very relevant if you're in hospitality or in somewhere where you have a guest room or a real need to block out light, but it's more specific than is an upholstery, which you will find in every kind of setting.
Yeah. And all these technical points that we're going to go through today in a little bit more detail, these are really to explain what is found on the back of your pattern card. So earlier on today and throughout yesterday, we've gone through the products and we've told you that all the information you need is on the back of the pattern card. But if you don't know what a hydrostatic head test is, if you don't know what a Martindale abrasion test is, then that information is...
It's a little bit obscure, isn't it? So it's good that you're here today to explain it all.
And I think if at the end of today that you've gone through this technical information and these products are for you, then make sure you get yourself one of these.
It's also worth noting that we have the binder, we also have loose memo samples of each colorway in each upholstery article, and actually we've made ring sets of those samples available to you as well. So you can order these.
There is. So moving on to the products themselves. So I think it's key to point out that not everything is the same. Not all the technical performances we talk about today are available on every single upholstery fabric, and there'll be varying different reasons for that.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing on your screen is a list of our products that are available either Crib 5 or EnduraCare. And again, we'll elaborate on these later, but just for now, for reference, EnduraCare is our range of stain-resistant upholstery. So these products come with stain resist or Crib 5 or both. So elegance is I suppose, the difference in that list, because
as a velvet,
because the handle is what we were looking for with elegance, you don't want to over engineer it.
Yeah.
Otherwise you lose that handle.
I think what we have done is we've taken a range of multiple different finishes and combinations of finishes, and we've slimmed them down in basically all cases to 1 or 2 finishes that we think are going to be most relevant to you. We don't, it's already complex enough. We don't need to over complexify it. So we have, one that is meant essentially for export, simple contract, anywhere that isn't really medical or healthcare oriented. And then we have one that is, we typically have just a single finish meant for the UK. It's heavy contract, it's Crib 5, it's stain resist, antimicrobial and everything else. And it's available with certification for the rest of the world too, should you require those additional tech specs.
So the reason I've kind of pointed that out to you at this stage is that I don't want you to confuse all of the technical performance issues that we're going to go through today and then kind of associate them with every upholstery fabric, because they are completely different within their own right. They are useful in their own environment.
There are one or two articles essentially in the range where we've thought, do you know what, these are not articles you're going to use in healthcare environment. They're a little bit fancy. They're clearly something you would use in high-end residential or hospitality, something similar, and therefore probably no need for waterproofing, for example.
Yeah. And the difficulties of manufacturing high pile, really soft handle velvets, but make them waterproof, antimicrobial, and stain resistant at the same time.
When most people don't need it that
really
way.
Tough when you need more.
When actually price is more the key, and that's what we always have top of mind for you as well.
Indeed. So moving on initially to our products again, we're just moving on to the different codes. So again, referring to the information on the back of a patent card. It's very easy for us as a business and for salespeople to kind of rely on that information on the patent card. But I think it's really key that you guys get a good understanding of what information is on the back and what that means. So you've got various different codes on the back of our EnduraCare Plus and our EnduraCare ranges. So you'll see a code that has 08 in it. You'll see a code that's got 06 in it. And they are, in essence, two completely different products.
So on most of these patent cards, you'll have two different columns. And they will be dedicated to a finish each.
That's right, and it's all to do with the finishes. So here in the UK, if it's contract upholstery, then you need to be Crib 5. We call it Crib 5, but it's actually British Standard 5852 to ignition source 5. Crib 5 is obviously easier to say.
Yeah.
So that's what the 08 code will give you, and that will give you a stain resist, an antimicrobial finish, waterproof,
and it's flame retardant. And as we've said, we've named it typically after the UK standard that it meets. Crib 5 is kind of like the most stringent and hardest to meet standard amongst those that this has been made to pass.
Yep.
We've also tested those same versions to lots of other standards, including cigarette and match, including the European version EN 10211 1+2, including IMO 8 for upholstery for marine settings, including NFPA 260 for the States. So, you know, we've made sure that if what you're interested in is Crib 5, or if what you're interested in is to have waterproofing and antimicrobial, we've tested everything else that's going to be relevant to you as well.
So in essence, what we've done is given you a set of products, a product offering that covers multiple areas and multiple different market sectors. And don't forget, you know, there's different standards between hospitality, healthcare, marine, as we say, retail.
Residential in the UK?
Absolutely, but in other contract environments like the leisure industry, in the workplace, that Crib 5 requirement is less and less, and you can use the cigarette and match option. So we have to have those two options available, which kind of outlines the flexibility in our offering at the minute. Again,
we're trying to make it simple. We realise it isn't that simple.
It's not simple.
The thing to do, I think, when in doubt, is make us aware of what kind of setting you expect to be using this in and for what usage. That's helpful as well. So is it going to be on a straight up chair or sofa? Where on the chair or sofa is it going to be? Is it going to be on the seat or on the back? What kind of setting? Is it land-based? Is it marine? And, you know, what kind of country is it going to go into? We'll give you the answers and tell you what is the most applicable.
We'll try.
Yeah. So another really important thing about all these articles is, like all the rest of our ranges, everything here is REACH compliant, that is chemicals regulations compliant. So no matter which finish, you can always rely on that.
Okay.
So we have really quite gone on about Crib 5, cigarette and match, all the rest of them, and I think it is worth us just explaining it a little bit more detail when there are different kinds of certificates to be thought about.
Okay, so we could have overcomplicated this, and we really could have done an hour on FR standards alone, quite easily. But I think we'd have lost your interest and probably have lost ours as well at the same time in terms of enthusiasm. But I think yeah, absolutely. I think we really need to point out here that there are different FR standards, and there's different FR standards in each country, as you will probably already know. There are different certificates for different types of sectors, and by that we mean it may be that in terms of hospitality and hotels, you might need to have washability needs to be at higher temperatures. It may be that you need your upholstery to be waterproof or bleach cleanable, or all these sorts of things. And IMO for cruise ships and the marine industry.
One kind of difference that probably you're not, well, you might be aware of, but doesn't necessarily immediately come to mind is usage. So within the UK, for example, there would be a different certification attached to usage between upholstery and drapery. You're probably aware of that,
Yeah.
but also things like top of bed, accessories, wall panels, all come under different headings, and all often require different certification.
They absolutely do,
Yeah.
and I think we get asked quite a lot, which is the reason why we're running this session today. Is we get asked a lot for drapery products that meet CRIB 5. But when you actually sit down and explain to somebody what CRIB 5 is, what it means, and what standard drapery has to meet, then obviously it all makes sense. But this is why we're doing this today, to try and drill
that comes up really an awful lot, doesn't it? Where we're asked for flame retardant certifications and tech specs that really pertain to upholstery, but for a drapery product, and vice versa. So yes, we have been asked actually in a previous session whether we would do a dummy's guide to certification. I think there's something to be said for that, so we'll think about working on that for you soon.
I think there is. I think the onus is on businesses like us to just really be at the forefront of that, the education side of that development side, because we realise, you know, drapery, upholstery, they're a real small part of what you do. You know, you may have lighting to consider, food, property, you know, beds themselves, flooring,
case goods,
tiles, mirrors, all sorts of different things, artwork, wallpaper.
And all of these things are subject to their own requirements.
Exactly.
So you can't possibly know it all.
So we're going back to explaining why we are here. That's why, because we can kind of cover all those off for you.
So I think what you're seeing on screen right now is a smattering of the different certifications that we have done for our fabrics. And apart from obviously providing the staff, the kind of human resource to give you all the expertise you need, we go to the expense of all of these things to make sure they're boxed off before you have a requirement for them. Sometimes at great expense.
Yeah. And we feel like sometimes we're repeating the same message, but that message has to be loud and clear for you, is that we have already done this for you. These certificates, if you were at a Fabric Hub session, you'll know that these are available for you to download. So if you're having to audit or cover things like Martindale abrasion tests, or if you're having to cover hydrostatic head tests, all of these things that we're going to go through in the next half an hour or so, then all of these certificates are available to you. Okay.
So here's a big question. A very technical question.
So yes, what is CRIB 5? It's a good question.
Yeah, we had prior to this, we had a session with our fabric technologist, Ashley. And we actually kind of stayed away from the very technical questions on upholstery testing because we knew we would be talking about that just now. So CRIB 5 is obviously, as we've talked about up until now, the FR contract requirement for upholstery in the UK.
So you'll see it as a medium, it's classed as a medium hazard, so it's actually BS 5852 to ignition source 5. It's classed as a medium hazard, and this is required in hotels, hospitals, restaurants, entertainment areas, as a standard.
Basically any contract setting.
Any contract setting in the UK.
Yeah,
absolutely. And the test itself, your image there, and you're probably wondering what you're looking at.
Jenga.
Is it giant Jenga? No. So basically that's a crib. I've actually got a little crib with me that you may be able to see. It's literally, it's like a set of matches, literally like a Jenga, with a wick at the bottom that you set fire to. And the image that you can see on the screen is where the crib is placed to consult the test. So once that's lit, it has to be done with the fabric in conjunction with the foam. So it can't be done on the fabric alone, like a vertical test that you would do with perhaps a drapery product. It has to be done in conjunction with the foam. And that crib is placed on the seat, as you can see it positioned up against the backrest. It's set on fire, obviously, and that has to stop burning within 10 minutes.
So this is almost, you know, you'll have heard about cigarette and match is pretty self-explanatory, right? They light a cigarette, they leave a cigarette on the upholstery, they light a match, they apply a match to the upholstery. But CRIB 5 is really almost, I guess, replicating an instance where some form of fuel, let's say a rolled up newspaper or something similar, has been left on a chair in a hotel room, what have you, making sure that that chair doesn't then become a major fire hazard.
Yeah, absolutely right. And then the test then is completed. and that needs to stop smouldering within 16 minutes. And that crib stays on the top of the foam like that and doesn't fall through. So you'll hear people referring to crib 5 as we've done it in the last few days ourselves, that it's been back coated. The way that it's constructed is to stop that flame getting through the fabric into the foam, so that when it gets to the foam, that foam would melt really, really quickly and it would fall through to the floor.
If you've got a carpet, big problem, right?
Yeah. So that's what crib 5 is and what it means. You do get other sorts of cribs bounded around. Crib 7 is a far bigger test, larger test. It's just a larger version of the crib. Generally, when we see that in really high security areas, places like prisons, oil rigs, places underground, that are really hazardous areas.
Yeah. So we're just going to talk briefly there about some of the international and also international standards. The only real international standard, of course, is IMO, which is the International Marine Organization testing for cruise ships and other marine settings. A lot of these different tests have a lot in common with cigarette and match and crib 5. What they're all looking for is spread of flame, burning drops or debris falling away and potentially lighting other sources of fuel in the room, and also how far the fabric melts. So these are they're all to varying degrees testing for the same things, but yeah, different requirements, different countries. So you probably have heard us speaking about the French M1 at some point, that there's varying degrees of severity or success. You might get an M2 or M3 rating for different articles. And in actual fact, you only really need a French M1 on buildings over 11 stories high, which is little known. In the US, you have Californian ratings. You also have the NFPA. In Germany, we have what we call the B1. And in Europe as a whole, many different countries actually accept European standard EN 1021 1+2.
Yep. So as you can see, there's a lot of FR standards, and crib 5 is probably the one main difference to all of those. But I think rather than getting fixated on each individual test and how it's conducted, we wanted to show you the crib because it's a slang word basically for a test that's done with a crib.
Yeah.
And it's just key to understand those key elements. And I think using our binder, using the knowledge on the back, understanding what FR standards we tell you that it meets, you should be safe in the knowledge that we've done that and we've got the test to prove that we've done that. So you're covered in that regard. So don't get totally hell-bent on understanding each individual test, because quite frankly, we don't understand each individual
that's what we've
test.
got the fabric technologist for.
That's why it actually exists.
Yeah.
And I think as long as we have that certificate, then we're golden.
Yeah. Another thing to mention is, of course, these certificates are renewable, right? We have to renew them. Typically, it's every 5 years. So that is done that's kind of done automatically here anyway. It's scheduled, and we have the certificates available for you. They're on fabric-hub.com on each article, but also if you email us, we can send those to you. So next up, we wanted to talk about stain resistance, because that is, although not a requirement, it's a very nice thing to have, isn't it, on an upholstery?
It absolutely is. And I don't think there's been a time where I've talked to anybody in the contract industry, especially in the UK, where stain or soil resistance hasn't come up.
Yeah.
It simply is a prerequisite nowadays. It's
going to drastically increase the lifespan of your chair or bench or sofa.
So there's lots of different pros to it. Obviously, it helps maintain appearance. It helps the durability, the longevity of that product, and obviously gives you more return on your investment. Stain resistance, though, doesn't mean stain proof.
Don't pour a whole glass of wine on it if you can avoid. I mean, we do. I mean, I have to say we're bad for this, aren't we? In like normal face-to-face sales meetings, we'll often pour a little glass of water over a fabric to show it off. But obviously, ideally, stain resist means that you're going to dab off the liquid as quickly as you can. The
little image that you can see on the presentation on the screen kind of shows you the effect the kind of water droplets so that those stains will have initially. If you can think of it as the hairs standing on your arm, if those hairs were standing up and you dropped some water or whatever on those hairs, they would run off your arms, but those hairs would then
interesting analogy, Stephen.
Fall flat. But I think the reason I say that is because if you think of the stain resistance as that really kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Is this a subtle little effect in the fabric? How you clean it, it's really important, because if you leave that stain in place for longer than 24, 48 hours, to be honest with you, whether it's got a stain resistant finish or not, you're going to struggle to get that stain out.
We'll explain, I think, the differences and the actual complete separation between waterproofing and stain resist in just a minute, I think, as well, won't we, for our Enduracare Plus finish. But yeah, so it will, any liquids will pill on the surface and run off. That's the first thing to think about.
That's right. So what we always advise is using absorbent cloths rather than rubbing. Because again, thinking of the hairs standing on your arm, if you rub those hairs, you'll just ruin it, they'll flatten. If you use an absorbent cloth and you dab it, then you're likely to get that stain lifted out and leave that stain-proof finish intact, stain-resistant finish intact. But we can talk about care instructions, as I say, separately, all the care instructions we've got available in terms of these stain resist.
It's interesting, because in blackout, when we produce blackouts, we use a fluorocarbon finish actually as it's a first stage that's applied to the base fabric, the greige that we use for the blackout, to stop the blackout coating from penetrating the face. And as a byproduct, it makes many of our blackouts stain resistant. So it's just a happy coincidence. With upholstery, of course, we've specifically looked for stain resistance, and it's applied separately on the face side.
And that's the point to understand here, is you get a lot of stain resistant products or soil resistant products that's sprayed after the fact. You'll see a lot of procurement forms or requests for quote forms with a box to tick that, is it soil stain resistant? And if it's not, can it be treated?
Yeah.
And I think if you're having it treated after the fact, it's not very effective at all.
We've talked about retrospective treatment of fabrics a lot during these last couple of days. Whilst the face fabrics that we use for upholstery are not inherently flame retardant, the application of the back coating that we use is inseparable from the face fabric, and it means that you don't have to apply any further treatment to the goods to make them flame retardant or stain resistant for that matter.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really key selling point. If you select an article that is residential by nature, right, it hasn't been made flame retardant before the fact, with a back coating or with inherent yarn, then you're going to need to treat it to make it flame retardant, stain resist, whatever else. Yeah. That treatment will not be durable, wash durable. Sometimes even just water landing on these treatments is enough to remove their effect.
Absolutely, it's a temporary, inexpensive fix that doesn't really...
An ecological fix as well, more chemicals, right?
Exactly right. So our actual stain resistant finish is where our fabric yarns are steeped in a bath. So when we manufacture these products, they're stain resistant within the yarns, rather than us producing a fabric and then spraying it afterwards and saying it's stain resistant, and then splash of water and it's not stain resistant anymore. And it's, as we put there, it's integrated into the yarn, and it's really, really good in terms of longer term stain resistance.
Another thing that we do, obviously, to help protect against staining and generally give you a longevity of the aesthetic of the fabric, is a lot of our fabrics are willfully, I guess, multi-tonal.
Yeah.
They might be cross-dyed, they might be yarn-dyed articles, or certainly using at least some kind of construction trickery to give them multi-tones, so that if you do make a mess of your fabric, if you do drop some ketchup on it, then it's not necessarily immediately visible. That's something we take more care with on upholsteries than we do even on drapery.
Yeah, and don't confuse stain resistance. I know the image suggests it, but don't confuse that with water resistance. As soon as you press that water in, it will seep literally into the fabric and into...
What's coming up shortly to waterproofing.
Yeah, I think it's naturally follows on. There you go, a bit by magic.
Amy, as if by magic. Yeah, so waterproofing is something that we have applied basically to the Enduracare Plus finish. So it's something that's available on the list of products that you saw earlier on in the presentation. Of course, you can go back to that if you like. You'll also find it on our website and all the tech specs on Fabric Hub. So waterproofing, whenever we claim something is waterproof, it's based on a hydrostatic head lab test from an accredited third-party lab.
Absolutely is, and I think there's some misunderstanding sometimes in the term water resist, waterproof, stain resist.
We're pretty clear on what we mean there.
I think we are quite clear on what we say. It's a waterproof hydrostatic head test. So you can see from the little diagram on the side, and no, they're not my equations. I've left those in. But it's basically the pressure in terms of water on the fabric, and until water droplets kind of start to show.
So basically a big plastic or glass column is placed on top of a fabric sample of your chosen fabric, and then that column is filled with water until the water starts to press through the fabric.
Yeah, it's literally called fluid. It's the fluid pressure, this head pressure. All of this creates that hydrostatic pressure, and the more hydrostatic pressure that you create, it's measured in meters generally.
Yeah.
And the higher that meterage is in terms of that hydrostatic head test, the more waterproof that fabric is.
So to give you an idea, I think most tent fabrics are 1 to 2 meters hydrostatic head. And obviously you're trusting that to keep you dry on a rainy night. So we've typically tested ours to a minimum of 1 meter. Actually, a lot of the new ones are tested to 2. Yeah. I
think we'll put it greater than 2, but in some cases they've achieved 5.
Yeah.
There's a breathable waterproof membrane that we use, and that really gives us good hydrostatic head.
So that's important, isn't it? So we're achieving the stain resist and the waterproofing in 2 separate ways, but applying them to the same fabric, so you have both.
Yeah.
Right. The waterproofing is done via a PU membrane on the back of the fabric. And then the stain resist, as Stephen said, is done through a bath that is affecting the face fabric.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in terms of the EnduraCare and the EnduraCare Plus branding, I think there was a fear when we created the EnduraCare Plus branding that we would perhaps upset that kind of hospitality fraternity with that EnduraCare that sounded quite healthcare orientated. But actually that's flipped on its head now.
Especially this last year.
Especially now this last year. And I think if it's a restaurant, if it's a space where there's lots of people, lots of high traffic area, whether it's a lobby in a hotel, why wouldn't you have a waterproof?
An antimicrobial article as well. I think we're coming back to that
Absolutely.
topic, aren't we?
And I think it helps cleaning. So if you've got that stain resistant finish, like we said earlier on, if it's not waterproof, just pressing on that water will ensure that water seeps into what's underneath the fabric. If you've got a waterproof membrane there as well, then it's going to be easier to clean. You're going to remove and lift your stains easier.
And the foam will never be affected, never start to smell.
And what that means for your clients is that keeps the furniture in service. They don't have to keep replacing chairs. It's an economical advantage for them. It obviously stops the fungal growth, the bacterial growth, which from a public space, why wouldn't you?
We've never really kind of, I guess, approached things like this as a sustainability issue, but they are, aren't they? Yeah. I mean, the longer you can keep a fabric, the longer you can use it without it deteriorating in look and in function, the more sustainable it is.
Yeah, of course it is. And obviously the less you're having to spend.
Apropos of that, we're going to talk a little bit about wear of fabric as well, which is, we have talked in a previous technical talk about longevity, and something that you might bear in mind when you're specifying fabric is, how long has it got to be there? How long is its expected lifespan? Yeah,
and I think what we've all made the mistake of doing, whether we're this side of the profession or whether we're at the customer facing end and the end user side of things, is we kind of take these things that we've learned over the years as being the truth, and there seems to be this must be over 40,000.
Martindale.
Looking for Martindale, over 40,000 rubs. What does 40,000 rubs actually mean, and how does that affect different types of fabric? It's always good to have a better understanding of what this test is. What you're seeing on your screen now is the actual Martindale tester, and this has got a piece of fabric on one side of it, and it's placed.
It simulates a load of shifting on top of it.
Literally lots of rubbing over the top like this. Yeah. Simply that. And it doesn't stop until 3 threads break. And if that 3 threads break after 10 to 20,000 rubs, then generally that would be what we class as a retail
sufficient
fabric.
for a domestic setting. Yeah.
If it's 40,000 or above, we would definitely class that as a contract fabric.
And for really high traffic areas, maybe like restaurants and what have you,
then 80,000 is generally what you'd be aiming for. In fact, most of our contract upholstery fabrics generally come in that 80 to 100,000 range. We've got one or two that are more delicate, something like the elegance and velvets.
A lot of them are 100,000 plus even. So at some point, we stopped testing because it's really not necessary to.
That's the key thing to kind of point out, because again, there's some misleading information sometimes in the marketplace. I think,
more is not necessarily better.
More doesn't necessarily mean better. I think there are companies out there that specifically, used vinyl as an example, and you start kind of a war with each other. You start off 100,000, 250,000, 500,000, 1 million rubs. To be honest with you, a vinyl
has no razor yarns to break.
There's no threads to get to, so you can almost say it's infinite rubs. But
one thing I think we could bring up though is Martindale and the similar American value Weizenbeek double rub. They also look at color fastness at the same time. So within that number of rubs, how much has the color changed? Because obviously you don't want threads to break, you don't want the color to fade from usage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're looking at raised textured fabrics as well, it's always worth to consider the aesthetic side of this as well. Yes, okay, it might say that it takes 100,000 rubs before it gets to breaking down the 3 threads, but if it's got a real raised texture, then yeah, but how's that going to affect the actual look of the fabric? Is it going to fade faster? Are you going to have areas like this on your seat, that arm seat, where it gets lots more tension, where that texture is actually going to start to disappear really quickly?
So another thing to bear in mind is, for example, and this isn't something that you would necessarily take from test results, but something like a long pile velvet will often can look pretty dismal pretty quickly, because the direction of the pile is then flattened, isn't it? You're left with bum shapes on your seat.
Yeah, we've all seen it. We've all been at.
You don't want your poor housekeepers to have to fluff up the cushions every 5 minutes.
We all name those coffee distributors that we all frequent from time to time. They've got these sofas, nice fancy sofas, and when they're brand new, they're great, but once they've been sat on 10,000 times, and you can see that the arms are wearing away, the seating areas are different, the piles are different heights. It's very key to look at, where's this fabric going, how high is the traffic, what parts of the chair is going to receive the most traffic, what type of fabric suits that part of the chair.
So there are some additional physical testing results that might be important to you. They tend to hang together with things like Martindale results. There tends to be a strong correlation. Things like seam slippage, dimensional stability, things like this might affect how well fabrics hold together where they're sewn into a seam or with another fabric. Especially important on upholstery, because there's a lot more stress on upholstery than there is on a curtain typically. But again, we test for all these things and make sure that they hit contract requirements.
We do indeed. And all of these things kind of combine themselves into literally your piece of furniture. How long is that going to last? How happy is your client going to be with what you're providing them? And then they're going to come back to you and give you a new project to go at after the result of what you've put in place. And part of that is Martindale, part of that is Weizenbeek. We've got pilling tests, we talked about stain resistance, whether this the colour fastness to washing and light, or depending on how you clean, and washability, I guess, in terms of whether you're using just absorbent cloths, whether you're rubbing. I remember a scenario where I was visiting it was actually in the healthcare, and there was real bad fading on a fabric, and I think it turns out that the cleaners were using quite strong chemicals and really rubbing those areas, those high traffic areas, and literally wearing away the fabric. Remember that even though we have these things in place, it is still a fabric that will wear. So apart from all of these wonderful things, what really matters at the end of the day is that if you're confident that we've ticked all the contract boxes for you, you know that we're certificated correctly, the tech spec is right for your usage, you need to get the product. It needs to be available. Would be nice.
So we've already mentioned that these upholsteries, nearly all, are finished in our UK facility. They're UK origin goods.
They are, and I think it's important that we keep trying to emphasise these same points throughout the last 2 days. Especially now, where we've got Brexit, we've got all sorts of issues in terms of freight and shipping from various corners of the world. we've got this UK stock availability for you, but we've also got that production facility as well. So we don't need to hold quite a lot of finished stock in-house because of the flexibility. We've talked to you about cigarette match and Crib 5 and various sorts of finishes. We can actually make those to order for you in a very short period of time. So just remember that's there for you.
So, yeah, if you are tempted to start using our upholstery fabrics, you can definitely find out more on the website, which is www.edmundbell.com. I encourage you, if you haven't already, to get yourself signed up to fabric-hub.com. This is our secondary website, if you like. It's a multimedia portal where you can find photos, both room shots for context and thumbnails per colorway. You can find flame retardant certificates. You can find certification relating to all the rest of the tech specs. Yep,
and I think everything we've gone through today, we've tried to keep it as informative as we can. We've gone through stain resistance, we've gone through hydrostatic head tests and waterproofing, we've gone through abrasion tests and how we conduct them and what they mean for you. If anything jumps out at you that you want further information on, or you want to consult us in any way, please get onto us, and we'll get onto that straight away for you.
So I think this marks finally the end of our 11 sessions, the bumper a couple of days that we've done for take a fresh look at Edmund Bell. We've gone through all sorts of things.
Wow.
We've had panel discussions about the state of the industry.
We have. We've had product overviews and new product developments.
We've talked about design trends this year. We've looked at technical issues and questions with our fabric technologists.
We've gone into more detail about our Printlab offering and our new URL, fabric-hub.com. I think we've mentioned it once or twice.
We've talked about how we bake blackouts, it turns out.
In an oven, still can't believe it.
And all about hairs on the back of your arm. It's really been a trip.
I don't even know where that came from. Probably the worst analogy I've ever given.
It's great, then you're stuck with it, Stephen.
But once you start, you can't stop.
But yeah, so we're really glad that you chose to spend your time with us talking nonsense like this. Thank you very much. As Stephen says, if you have any questions, get in touch and we'll try to answer them. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you very much.